Resume recording again. So don't forget the poll. So we met on the Twitter, didn't we, Erin?
Yeah. For the last few months, because of everything that we do is so dependent on meeting with people and running consultations and running different events that impact on public space. We just had to make a decision to really just aim to go online and I suppose advocate for the things we advocate for online. So we became in part-time ranters on the issues of play affecting children in particular North Inner City Dublin. So we have anybody who knows Dublin, you've got your north side and you've got your south side, and then you've got all these little areas in the north side of Dublin that go from the headquarters of Google and then literally in its shadow some of the most deprived and vulnerable children in the country, or where we work, which is across the river from Google. We work under the shadows of the likes of Salesforce and HubSpot on a street called Sheriff Street, which would be the center of there'll be a lot of needs in the area. So if there is an issue with Irish society in terms of drugs, gangs, violence, you'll often find the coalface is Sheriff Street, which is where we work, and the so that's kind of we work from Sheriff Street all the way up to a place called O'Connell Street, basically, which is the main thoroughfare. It'd be like the Oxford Street of Dublin. But again, all around that, you've got 43% of its residents are under 18. So
wow, 43%, that's a high percentage, isn't it?
Yeah, just in the kilometre and a half around the top of O'Connell Street, you've got 43% of its residents under 18. And what's really striking about that is the amount of space that's dedicated to young people in the area, and how it's dedicated to young people in the area. And I suppose that's what I was going to talk to you about today, if that's okay.
Yeah, there were a number of things. So just to sort of give a bit of context, when I'd been admiring your wonderful tweets about things you've been doing for many years, actually. So it wasn't just lockdown that sort of brought you further to my attention. I suppose I've always been intrigued as you've taken quite what I thought was initially like a design kind of view of a multidisciplinary team of people looking at a city as a playful thing. And obviously I don't come across that every day of the week, and I'm also interested in playful cities. So I kind of just wanted to go back a step almost in how did it all start for you? What was the sort of sparking point? You're currently sat as a teacher back to school on Monday in your office, which has very little natural lighting. Last time we met, you gave me the most wonderful whistle-stop tour of Dublin from your car. And you showed me some of the places that you've just mentioned, which I'm sure we could do again in future, because as a way of getting to see someone else's patch, it's utterly wonderful. So no disrespect to your office. I'm sure it's lovely, but not quite the same. So as a teacher at a high school in Dublin, can you tell me how this all came to be, how a playful city emerged for you?
Well, if it's okay, I can share the screen and I can show you some of the things that gave that was the, if you like, the starting point. We met on a different project, actually. There was 4 of us in the group. There's Naomi, Marissa, Nessa, my wife, and I. And then we work with different partners depending on different projects. So I see Emma's there, and Creighton, and we've been really lucky to work with really brilliant people. Like, we're just so jammy. I don't know if you use that phrase in the UK, but we're really lucky and who we've been able to work with, and that's a big part of what we do. And that kind of that came out from the from what we'd worked on previously, which was a project called Upstart, which was a collaborative project between a number of different individuals. We were all friends, where we ran what turned out to be Ireland's largest outdoor exhibition ever during the 2011 general election, which Newsnight ended up doing a story on us in the UK. It's called Newsnight, I think. We were looking at this idea of just the city being used for either imperatives, using public space as advertising hoarding, or as places that you shop or you travel through. And rarely were these designs being places to linger, places to play, places that kind of thing was striking us at the time. In 2013, it was after the recession, and all building effectively stopped in the city. And this picture you're looking at was actually to be social housing, and social housing had been knocked in a public-private partnership, and then had not been rebuilt because the private partner had pulled out of the deal. And so you had hundreds of families that had moved around the city and nothing being built on it. Now, we were very aware that what we were possibly doing was actually putting a bit of window dressing on it. And I guess that was one of the arguments for, I'll come back to that in relation to kind of gentrification and hipster hangouts, or whatever you want to call them. But we started fundraising, and we started fundraising with pro wrestling nights and poetry nights. So we had really well-known Irish poets, slam poets, Sense the Pun, and we went into what was to be a Tesco supermarket and turned it into a wrestling arena. And we would run very anarchic, crazy nights of bring your own beer. And one of my favorite activities is going to see pro wrestlers in Dublin, and poetry nights. They're my two loves. Two things I miss most about lockdown. But we raised money to buy this park, to build this park with the help of over 1,000 individual contributions from the public, and over 500 volunteers put it together. I was involved in the core management team, and in particular, I was involved with the Palette Theatre that you see on the left there. And that was a year in the planning, which was a cross-border project between youth from Belfast, from the Loyalist tradition, and youth from Dublin, 5 of whom should have been living on the park. So we wanted to make some form of a reference to how people are being built out of their own areas and how people can build in their own areas. And we were aiming to create a template, and at the time, toolkit was the kind of very hip phrase to call them, but a manual for how to engage in public space, how to engage in volunteering, how to engage in crowdsourcing, and in particular, how to engage with what was approaching in 2016, a few years back, and we're still actually dealing with it at the moment, which was the 1916 commemoration in Ireland. It would be the equivalent of Independence Day, I guess, in the context of the way certain people view it in Ireland. And it was the rebellion against the British at the time, 1916, that would have kind of been the real catalyst of all the eventual establishment of the Republic. But one of the things we were very aware of is that a lot of people were talking about commemorating this in all sorts of jingoistic ways. And what we wanted to do was look at how that commemoration could be used as a bridge, and how that could be used as a way of opening up a discussion in relation to how we commemorate our history. So there's an example of a bonfire that's built for July 12th in Northern Ireland, generally built by young teenagers, and they're very much what would be considered symbols of sectarianism. There's usually an Irish flag, some Republican politicians' effigies up on top. There's often some really offensive and very aggressive stuff being put up in banners on those bonfires. And then there's also the middle-aged Irish, early Irish forts that you'll find in the west of Ireland as well. And so what we looked to do was we worked with a group of very vulnerable young people from Belfast, and brought them to Dublin, which we brought them to Dublin for a week to build this theatre. It took us a week to build, and we worked on, in the mornings, we worked on workshops around identity. After a year of workshops on this as well in their respective areas, and then we worked on the actual build in the afternoon, and then the evenings we'd work on poetry, which we performed in the National Theatre, and we performed on the stage of this theatre that we built on the day of its opening. And then we brought the young people into all sorts of debates about the use of this space and the political use of this space. And we always included the children in representing their own build. And that's nearly the finished product. We hadn't roofed it yet, or at least we hadn't roofed the stage. And we'd come up with convention, covenant, and covenant's a kind of a funny word in Irish history, because it also relates to the Ulster Covenant, which is, for anybody who doesn't know, it's just it's the covenant to take up arms against the crown in defense of the Union, which is what I'm probably giving it a very poor explanation there, but it's essentially one of the foundational things behind loyalism in Northern Ireland. And the young people drafted this covenant that they all signed up for. And you'll notice there, they call themselves the Dubfast Nation. They stand united in peace, love, harmony, that there is no border. They were really clear on that. They really were very, very certain that there can't be a border, and that they wanted to create change in their communities. In fact, out of the 17, 4 went on to become youth workers after this project, and decided that project is that. And little things like "you will never take our freedom," and they read this on the opening of the stage. And it was more to this park than other things. And there was we had homework clubs, we had supper clubs, we had all sorts of trade schools, we had all sorts of things, day and night. But it was this, and sorry, this, I'm getting back to it now, Emma. It was this little playground that the young people built actually in the time that they weren't working at Heights. We couldn't have them all working at Heights, which was this little loose parts play area that was using none of the standard play equipment that you'd find in your usual playgrounds, because technically it was an event, so we could manage the insurance implications around it, because it was a 30-day event that we were running as opposed to a permanent build. And so what you had was the play area, but the play area was was far enough away from the cafe where the parents would sit, that the parents would feel comfortable letting their children play at the play area. And then also where they'd sit underneath the sheltered area too. And then you also had the thread, the snake weaving through the park, that there would always be a flow going through it. So there was always a kind of a tether of the eye on the children's play, but there was always people, there was always that kind of passive surveillance of activity and stuff. And we had no antisocial activity in the park at all, actually. And there was 40,000 visitors, third biggest free attraction in the country for the month of August in 2013. And it went down really well. It ended up getting awarded for the best public space in Ireland at the time. And that's where we all met, or at least that's where we met Naomi, one of the group in the park. And that's where we met Niamh Moore-Cherry, who's the deputy, the vice principal in geography in the University College Dublin. And that's what started the kind of seeds of a Playful City. And what was really important about all of this was that we established a really wide partnership with loads of different organizations that were interested in the city and how the city was being used. Children were very much at the center of the build and the design right from the very start, for a year before this month-long park opened up. And then throughout the month, they were engaged in different things like homework clubs, organizing different things, even stewarding, all sorts of things. There was always children around the park, with parents or without parents, local kids from the youth service, which is just behind the theatre, where that orange van is behind the apex of the theatre. Just up to the left there was a youth group there. And so what became very clear was the role that children could play in making spaces safer, making spaces more humane, making spaces just more light and playful. And that was a real revelation to me. I was just about to become a father, and I was really taken with this dynamic that developed. Thanks to A2 Architects and Sean Harrington, the architects who worked on the master plan. But that was really a huge thing in terms of how public space was being used. And it really kind of begs the question in terms of just the first question we always ask then is just, are children people? And it's an obvious and stupid question to ask. And at the same time, it seems that nobody asks that question when they're designing in so many places in the public realm, because they're almost hostile to families. And that was one of the things that myself and my wife noticed, was that when we had a child, for a couple, we used to go into town quite a lot. We'd be at music festivals, we'd be doing all of these things. And in Ireland, there just wasn't much, there wasn't many options for people who wanted to avoid playgrounds and who wanted to avoid certain, like those kind of soft play, kind of industrial park things, the monkey places, those things, where there was loads of echo and all that, just not very nice places to be around. And so what we were approached by UCD, and they asked us to put on a small event for their students, and we ended up organizing a European-wide conference on playful design for 600 people, which we almost had to cancel because of a hurricane. But it was one of those things that it just kind of started. And so that's the kind of the backstory of a Playful City, but it's important for a few reasons. One is just the centrality of children in the design, and two is the importance of a voluntary ethos as well. It's not to say people shouldn't get paid, I'm not saying that, but there is also room for voluntary ethos in a lot of communities. That anyway, that's another thing. And then the other thing would be partnerships for projects. And so in the context of Dublin at the moment, when we're working in Playful City at the moment, one of the things came out of the conference was the research done by Ozan Balchik, an architecture student at the time in his final year, who worked with us for that year. And it's just to be basically 1 in 5 of all people in Ireland are children, are under 15. 1 in every 4 children live in Dublin, and that 32% of that population live in the inner city in Dublin. And this would be a map of the inner city. And so, but there's a huge discrepancy in what's available for children in the north of Dublin and what's available for children in the south of Dublin. So you've got in the south of Dublin a density of, say, 67 children in that area in Mansion House A. And then you've got a much bigger range of young people living in North Dock. And yet, as I'll just show you now, sorry, my slides are a little mixed up. I'll come back to those. But some of the big questions that are the most common question asked by apartment letting agents agents in Ireland at the moment is that one: how can I stop children from playing in common areas? And you're talking about 30,000 or approximately 30,000 children living in the inner city, living in apartments, living in these areas. And these are the common questions that are being asked. And it's the way in which they're being phrased is which we're trying to bring debate around, and essentially to ask people to be, I suppose, less tolerant of that way of thinking, and phrase that differently. Like, why do we have to phrase it like that? And if you're over 12 years of age in Dublin, you really don't have much to do or anywhere to play. Because the bylaws in Dublin are designed in such a way is that you can be asked to leave a playground if you're not supervised by a parent, and you can be asked to leave a playground if you're over 12. And the problem with that is that in the public realm, in Ireland, in Dublin, you've got 17,000 children living in the inner city, and half of those, almost half of those live, that's about 8,000 children live in the north inner city. What's really, in terms of what we're looking at, is what's really disturbing almost, is that out of the playgrounds that are in Dublin, there's only 3 football pitches worth of play space for kids to play in or to go to in the inner city. That's 8,000 children, 8,200 children with the equivalent of 3 football pitches of space. And then the rest is road. There is very little greenery. There's one park, but it's about 3 or 4 kilometers of very hostile roads all around. And then those playgrounds, most of them in the public realm, are locked in the evening. So there literally is nowhere to go for teenagers in the inner city in Dublin. And what they do then is that they walk around, they don't settle. And so they just walk. The Muga pitches, those kind of things, there is one, but it's an Astro pitch. There's one gate in. It's just, there's very little accommodation for children. And this is the weird thing, is that there's also been a 773% increase of local authority playgrounds in Ireland. And yet there's only a fraction of those that are actually in the public realm. Only 28 out of the 60 of the playgrounds in North Dublin in particular are actually in the public realm. That's the 3 football pitches. And so what you have is that in the south of Dublin, you've got about 6 meters squared for each child. In Dublin, you've got, in North Inner City Dublin, you've got 0.72 of public ground space, 0.72 meters squared of public ground play space available to young people. And so in the context of 1 in 4 children in Ireland being overweight, 4 out of 5 children not getting the recommended activity levels, we see this as a really big, not just a problem in relation to the rights of children to play, but it's also a health problem. And it's also a problem in terms of how we share our public realm and how adults dictate pretty much every aspect of children's lives in the inner city in Dublin. And so we're kind of coming back to this, and that's kind of the core message of what A Playful City is about. And I'm sure everybody here is thinking the same. And it's that idea, is if we want a future-proof, if we want a sustainable city, it has to be designed for the youngest residents. And that's really the key. If you want sustainable cities, you can't be designing them like, the name is gone now. I can't quote this man, but it's basically designing them like everybody's 30 and athletic. So when we talk about partners, we work with a whole range of people, from colleges to sponsors, to embassies, to private businesses, to media. And we try to really create a wide network to share a message and to promote a particular ethos in relation to the rights of the child. And one thing that I was talking with Emma about is that it's when we design we're a playful city as opposed to the playing city or a play city or whatever you want, because there is a difference. Like, obviously there is a difference, and playful often comes with an agenda or comes with a direction. It's not as freely chosen as play, I guess. And so a lot of what we do also embodies a particular thing that we're advocating for in relation to play. So I'll explain that, and I'll finish up soon. So we develop and run a lot of consultancy evenings where we consult with the public, but we also have developed a mobile consultation room that doesn't rely on those that are really engaged and interested or really opposed to particular aspects of being developed in their community. So we're trying to hit the middle of the bell curve of people who attend those Thursday evening in your local parish hall public realm meetings, the wonderful world of public realm meetings. But so we bring these into play streets. We run play streets. in Ireland, the rules of the road and the laws around the road are very different into the UK. So we don't have that same tradition of kind of street parties and things that you would have more of in the UK. And we engage with young people in that way, that we bring those in, and then we bring those findings back to and with other children into those evening meetings, where we try to make them again as playful and as anarchic as we can, but to still really dig into what the findings were in relation to those things. So when we designed this thing called the Spielmobile, which we're constantly redesigning, we designed it so that when we did hold, and you'll recognize some of the speakers here, Margaret Hunter Blair and Adrian Fauché, and we had the head of tourism for Europe, and loads of people. There was a really lovely day. But what we then did was we took the findings that we found from the play streets, which then informed the themes of our play conference, which then the play conference informed on what it was that we needed to do in terms of hone those. And then what we did was we started to create a methodology in creating our installations. So I'll just show, if it's okay, I've about 5 minutes left, Emma, is that okay?
You're doing fine. You're absolutely, I could listen to you all day long. Keep going.
Okay, thanks. This is the zigzag. It's a bench that we created. I'll explain what was the rationale behind it, but I'll just show you in terms of the process. So there was, again, this was sponsored, and it ran as a community festival, as part of a community festival, and it started with play streets. So we took the findings from that, and then we brought them to professional designers and students and academics. That's Barry, the designer, or at least the head lecturer in the Creative Arts School in the Technical University Dublin. And what we tried to do with that bench essentially was to it was really a response to the needs of a lot of teenagers actually in the area. I know that a lot of younger children were there in the video, but what was happening in that area is that the young people in that area will actually hang out on that campshire of the canal. On the other side of the canal, on gabion walls that are under apartment buildings. And they'll be, like any group of teenagers, they'll be very social and loud. And that was leading to conflict with the apartment owners, the residents of the apartments, who were calling the Gardaí, the police. And then what was starting off as a small incident was escalating into conflict with a policeman or policewoman. And one of the needs of the youth service there was to remove that friction in relation to where young people were hanging out, and provide an alternative seating for young people who were using the canal to swim in, but also not wanting to swim there every day of the summer, or not wanting to hang out on the other side, but to be able to have an alternative place to go where they wouldn't get into trouble with residents or get into conflict with other people in their local community. And that was the concept around that particular bench. And so that was designed. That took a few months of consultation in the area, but our goal is kind of a long-term goal to stay in that area and to keep on talking with young people, and to help them represent their views, in particular to council in Dublin. And so we developed that Play Street map that we run, but we help just the local community do. And one of the things that is nice about it is that we run a Reminiscence Workshop, which is basically asking young people to call to their older neighbours and ask them what games that they used to play, and then invite the neighbours to teach them on the day of the Play Street. And so you bring a kind of an intergenerational approach to street play in that way. And again, it just kind of went down really well. And again, like Playing Out were really kind and really helpful in terms of giving us some steers. And that led us to work with the Ombudsman for Children in promoting the right to play for children. And we composed poetry and different artwork for them. And that brought us to Berlin, where we worked on a 2-week long curriculum for children to take over a square in their street and to design a crooked football pitch. And if they could design a play island, what would they design? And we gave them a palette of palettes and posters and green and blue paint, and let them at it. And we just they said, I want a hammock, and we're like, let's build a hammock. Or I want a bingo hall, and we're like, let's build a bingo hall. And we worked with them in consulting local neighbors, and it wasn't just children. And eventually, now that's not finished yet, but we involved all the local old age groups, and we put a cinema screen in the square in the evenings from the local community centre there. That actually the cinema was on one side of the road and the audience were on the other, and traffic that had to travel through the square had to travel through the line of the audience, which was we've had a nice subversive thing to do. Now it was a 7 km/h limit in this area, but at the same time, most people were driving faster. But this really put a dent in that for a good while. And then final things we bring back the zigzag. We've also developed xylophone benches that also can be moved around based on those Jersey barriers that the council put up around the city. We wanted to hack those. They're also a wonderful base, so that you can't cantilever them over. And again, working with those young people who use the canals and the bridges to dive and swim in Dublin. We're working on water pollution monitors with Icecape and UCD, and we're working on different floating play areas that the teenagers are designing for the canals. Unfortunately, we've had to put a stop to our designs. This is our first kind of iteration of the day, but of all the children in Dublin that are going to get into trouble in the water, it's the children around this area who use the water as their play area. And so as part of this, we ran a kind of a token system where you got a shot at the Zorbs, you got free ice cream, you got all those things if you did your life-saving workshops with the Royal Life Saving Society. And so that's what I mean by playful, is that we engage with play, but we also engage with there's always something else. I suppose it's that idea of play it can also be, there can also be a polemic in terms of what we do. It's promoting the freedom to play and the right to play. And that kind of finally finishes up in this idea of, in Ireland, there's a word for street, which is shráid. It's a very Ulster Irish word. It's a very Northern Irish word. But streets aren't the place that you drive through as a passage between the houses. It's just, you'd hear older people call it the shráid, the front of the house. It's the street. It's just the area in front of your house is your home. And that, I think, has been lost in a lot of cities, obviously. And so we're working with Sean Harrington Architects, Dublin City Council, and UCD in looking to reimagine and redesign for Dublin's Georgian laneway network as well. We've been really looking to work with NCAD, the interaction design course, their master's course there. And that's where you see the Come Here to Me, which were really wonderful designs of digital, really low tech interventions that would have sensors that would call out to people to come here to them, to come here to the pipe and talk into it. And there was just really wonderful designs with the students in NCAD. As you can see, they're just really simple, but really obvious as to what it is that they can do. And those recordings are then uploaded to the cloud, and then you can curate them afterwards. And so we've been speaking at different conferences and things like that in relation to play. And we've been working on school zones in Dublin too, talking about the impact of traffic on children's play and it being a barrier to play, talking about how air pollution is a problem for many children, and building up a network of different people that we're working with on this project. Dublin City Council are on their 40th school zone in Dublin City Council at the moment. They built it today, they launched it today, their 40th one. We worked on our children's school, which was the second place zone in Dublin at the time during the summer. And that's the kids going to school. And we're currently working with two architects on a design for lawns in housing estates to turn them into mazes. So it's just a lawnmower. This is an A2 design, Peter Carroll, who designed Granby Park, to basically allow for communities to have more playful use of the lawn areas. And currently we're working on a project with young people back in Sheriff Street, the Canal group, to design playful interventions. A lot of it's online in the local area. And that's kind of where we're at. Sorry, I waffled on for so long, didn't I?
You did not waffle on. I'm speaking for myself, and I'm sure everybody else who's joined us today. I'm just blown away. I hadn't seen all the visuals, I suppose, before today's chat as well. And I really wish that you could just take over the running of the UK and Ireland and make this happen in every single town and city up and down the land. So given that we can't clone you, maybe it's up to us here as well to work out, because I know we've got our challenges in England, but that was absolutely magnificent. Thank you.
I'm always conscious because I never know what to say. Like we're still, like I've been working on public interventions since for about 15 years now, but more kind of arts based, and I was childless, so I didn't even think that children were people or existed, other than in schools as a teacher. Like they were kind of over there, but not in my social circle, or definitely not in my town. I never noticed until I became a dad, and then I was like, what the hell is going on here? And why do they expect me to sit in this? I never went to playgrounds as a kid. I suppose I grew up in the 80s, so they just weren't around. They were so exotic.
Well, it doesn't sound
And
like there's been many more since, by the sounds of things.
loads more. And it's not, sorry, I hope I'm not coming across as ranting against playgrounds. I'm ranting against a certain type of ethos that informs playgrounds, in particular in Dublin. They're essentially, and every single one in North Inner City Dublin is identical. And this is the thing. It's not and they're all dedicated to a certain age group, bar maybe 5 out of the 60. And so it's very, and then it's not taking into account the different communities that are in North Inner City Dublin, and the way those communities interact, and the way those young people in those communities would interact and socialize. So there's a whole range of things going on that don't seem to be addressed in the design of the play spaces at the moment, other than insurance and low maintenance.
And so I sort of said we'd make this more of a discursive conversation as well. And I'm sure that thoughts must be popping off in people's heads as as they're reflecting upon what they've just seen that you've done. So anybody's more than welcome to put their hand up or turn their camera and the mic on and become part of the conversation as well. I can see in the chat everybody's very, very positive about what you've just shared with us. You also had a question, didn't you, to sort of pose to the group of people that have come today. We've obviously said what makes for a playful city, but also if anybody wants to sort of ask a question before Aaron does, we're kind of interested in what we think makes for a playful city. And you had a question about how many adults have been a barrier to children's play, I think, but you could expand on that.
Yeah, I suppose I was saying to Emma, we again during lockdown, one of the things that keeps on cropping up in, again, North Inner City Dublin, because it's also the IFSC area, it's the International Financial Services Centre, so it's where all the money laundering goes on. So the problem is that a lot of office workers drive into work in the inner city, and there's actually a kind of an informal economy of parking spaces being given out to the workers in the area. So there's a constant stream of traffic going in and out of the roads that aren't from the area, and and families that look whatever, but the impact of families making deals with office workers, or residents making deals with office workers in parking spaces, is that there is a constant flow of traffic at school times, and also in the summertime the streets are always full of cars, so there's very little room even on the streets that are quiet to play out, because of the nature of the area in relation to how adults are assuming that driving into work is still a kind of a victimless I won't say crime, but like a victimless activity. So I sound like a raving car mad nut that's against them, but I'm not. But they really are a barrier. And I suppose the question I had was, how is it that and how do you approach adults in relation to like, we are often the biggest barrier to play, whether it's parental fears or whether it's the fact that we drive our cars or expect to drive our cars through areas, every area. I know the UK is having all sorts of culture wars with LTNs, but I suppose, like, where are those barriers that people see in their experience that adults put in front of children's play experiences, in particular teenagers? Like, they don't have an excuse. We were teenagers, right? We were teenagers, so we should know what it's like. You don't play the same as an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old when you're 16.
I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to chip in, and please do, because I was really struck by how much of your work really centres teenagers. And I'm not quite sure who else is out there doing it quite so, creatively and visibly, and involving them in the sort of co-design of their spaces and their playgrounds. And I felt that was really quite wonderful, because I think And they're in danger of being, you know, ASBOs in the last sort of decade, which meant that teenagers weren't really wanted on the streets in England for sure. Now we worry about them spending too much time on their screens, never coming out of their rooms, and the pandemic's only served to sort of make that kind of place they play and connect. So I do think it's amazing to see what you've been working on with teens. I think adults can be quite scared of teenagers, can't they?
They yeah, I guess so. I've been teaching teenagers for 20 years. Now I teach in a very different demographic to some of the work I do. I also run a lot of the Playful City stuff in my school. And in particular, I look after a transition year, which is 16-year-olds, the year ahead there. And it's a gap year for academics. So it's between the equivalent of the GCSE and the A level. In between those two, where the boys, ours is an all boys school, focusing on non-academic experiences like work placements. And we're doing a wonderful project with a student from Trinity College on analyzing lichen on the walls and on the trees, and looking at how that corresponds with air pollution in the area. So there's some, you can get up to some really lovely stuff here. But they can be intimidating because young people, again, but all you need to do is think about how you used to socialize as a teenager and what socializing meant to you. And it was often sitting or standing on different levels, slouched, mumbling, and kind of I wouldn't call it horseplay. Actually, calf play is probably a better description for some of the years I've seen playing. But it's that kind of it can be intimidating to people, and I suppose that's where intergenerational design of spaces, which seems to be so lacking. I think the UK is the same. Like Ireland is obviously very bound up in terms of that British culture to a large degree in terms of public space because of its history. But when you go to the likes of, say, like San Sebastian, for example, and you look at the way public space is used and how intergenerational that space is and how children are tolerated, and there's an entirely different ethos in relation to the likes of the Italians, the Spanish, or the Basque, or French, and Germans, to at least on, again, I don't know if that's, I haven't followed this up with any study. We've just looked at, in particular, just the playgrounds of North Inner City Dublin. But like how much of the design of the public spaces informs people's reaction to it, because you're literally just building stuff for like 3 to 12-year-olds, and no one else can go in. So you're not only isolating those, you're isolating the parents of those children from their local community, generally in the corner of a park behind a fence, in a really sterile environment without any contact to nature. Now, there's some really wonderful exceptions to that, but not many in North Inner City Dublin. And then often the answer is, well, these kids should be joining sports clubs and stuff. But when the sports clubs are closed, when you're not training for that hour, what else do you do? Where else do you go? Can you be spontaneous? And the answer in a lot of times in Dublin, again in the inner city Dublin, is no, you can't be. You have to ask for permission to play. And sorry, I feel like I always rant because it does get under my skin the way it's young people young people have to ask for permission, and there is an awful lot of reports where young people are stopped an awful lot just by going about their business in their local communities.
I mean, you talked about it being like a stain on their sort of emerging adulthood as well, if they get into trouble as a teenager. You had quite a sort of strong view on that, didn't you? How that can blight their sense of self and confidence.
Well, again, it's that idea of topophilia, of love of place, of connection with place. And if the only connection with the place is like these kind of fragmented areas, and that the only time you use your local area is to get like to go through to another, I suppose I didn't really have that experience as a kid. I was really lucky. I grew up in a North Dublin, like a suburb, where there was a building estate that had gone bust in the 80s, and so we just played on a building site for like breaking glass and bonfires, where like our teenage games, and climbing trees above the roof level, old conker trees, so you get caught in the draft and just sway in the wind about 60 feet up. It was brilliant. But yeah, those were and you got to intimately know trees and stuff. Anyway, I'm probably being very rosy spectacled, or rosy tinted spectacles here, but yeah. So we're looking at ways, and now we're also dealing with, in North Inner City Dublin, we're also dealing with the rise of far right racism and far right groups starting to emerge, and under the again, kind of like your ultra right in the UK, it's under this banner of the flag of nationalism, and that's what the youth services are reporting is a real worry. It's mental health, and it's the emergence of these really ultra right groups in the North Inner City, because you've got a huge portion of this particular area whose families would not have been born in Ireland, living in the area. And
your work seems to always be ever kind of, I suppose, receptive or responsive to the dynamics of change within the city. And obviously you've got a huge passion, and you managed to mobilize and marshal a really big group of people to work together collaboratively, which I find really impressive, really, what you've created and how many people can get involved in this. And I think that passion for what you care about so deeply obviously informs the process that you take. And I just wonder, there may be people in the group today who are also kind of equally passionate but don't always know where to start, or don't feel they necessarily got the right mix of skills, or what have you. What would your summation be, I suppose, in that it's not like this is the end of a conversation. We are going to continue to have more playful conversations moving on from this week, but what would you say would be a good starting point for people?
One is work with people. We've been working with people we like, and it's really nice, actually. I think anybody involved in anything to do with what we're talking about or what you've been talking about in the past, it's one of the loveliest things about it is that you always meet sound people and generous people and kind people and all the rest. And then the main thing for us was developing partnerships with groups that would align themselves with what we're talking about, and then you can kind of build on those out. So once you get one person, you can knock on the door of another. So once we talked with Sean Harrington Architects about one thing, we then went to UNICEF, and once we had UNICEF on board, we could then talk to the Early Childhood Ireland thing, and then once we talk to those guys, we could then go to the embassies of Denmark and France, and you can kind of bring your group with you. It kind of adds weight to the kind of four little nerds who are really interested in public space design.
You've done pretty well for four little nerds. Yeah, I get that, because I do think sometimes it can feel a little bit like you're looking for your tribe a little bit, in your own place, wherever your place is. But I think the bit where you have worked so well is looking at the data as well, and actually evidence it. So for some people who need the sort of harder data, the facts, the cause and effect kind of stuff, you've done really well as a team, I think, to sort of surface some of that, haven't you?
We've been just really lucky. We'd worked with UCD in Granby Park, and then that the Marissa and Naomi also run a group called Connect the Dots, which is it's similar to what we do in Playful, which is basically we never really know what we're doing until we're doing it. And it drives all the guys crazy who are building for us, because we're always telling them we don't have a clue. We don't know what it is that you're asking us to do, because we need to ask the young people what it is they're experiencing based on the guide of what the youth service is noticing. So the youth service was now basically saying, none of these people have training in any sort of life-saving. How can we train them in life-saving? And to tell a young person of 15 in the summer, what about doing a life-saving course? Won't that be fun? Or hang out with your mates and jump off bridges? I'll take the bridges. And so the thing was, is how do you, so we trained 400 young people that day.
Wow.
It was just, how do you do it in such a way that it one builds a sense of identity and pride of place, and it lets people in the area, those big companies know, with the help of some of those big companies, by the way. We're really lucky to have HubSpot on board, who support us in a lot of things we're doing. And in fairness to them, they're just from another study that was done, they really are very, very proactive in the area in supporting pretty much anything they can support. And the thing is just trying to respond, always kind of just ducking and diving a bit, and just trying to work it out as you go, because it's really messy. And like being open to that and just not caring about it looking like another whatever slick event. And that's still important. That's really important. In fact, it has to look good. It has to be designed. It has to, like, you have to stand over it, but it has to go deep as well. Like, you can't, or at least we have to try and go deep. And we're only focusing in on the first stage of the design process. Like, I know a lot of the people here are probably looking at more longer term interventions, but we're very much the first month, or the first interaction that a council would have to bridge that. So that's kind of where we're coming at. I think Yagmar is looking to ask.
Does anybody want to ask a question? I know we've gone past 2:00, and I think you've also probably got some teaching to do, so we won't hang about too much longer. We will share this video and the chat, but anybody got any last minute questions, anything they want to say?
I have, sorry.
No problem, go for it.
I'll just pop the video as well. Oh, hello.
Oh,
I just wanted to ask, how does the ideation process go before the event happens? Like, how do you decide, okay, we have to do something about this place? Does the council approach you, or does the public do? Because I'm very interested and I have some ideas in my mind, and I'd like to contact you somehow and just try to work maybe on ideas.
Yeah, it depends on the project. So we kind of think of ourselves, we keep on rationalizing ourselves as a kind of like a theater production company that works on one project, or maybe more at a time. And then what we try to do is, the first thing we do is we approach those that are working with the young people in the area. So we started with Little Treasures. It was a community crash on one of the streets, and asked them what it was that they needed, what it was that they actually wanted. And then we identified the needs of the adults. And then what we did was we compared those to the needs of the young people as the young people saw it. And that's how we first do it.
Okay.
And then we get the young people to ask the older people that aren't working with them how it is that they see their local area. And then what we do is we run a play street, and we look at how that corresponds with the kind of people that aren't working with young people and just kind of observing them in their local area. And then after the play street, we then take those designs and we bring them to design professionals, and look at how to actually, I suppose there's that old thing that I don't know who's saying it or who said it, but like if you ask a young person, often if you ask anybody, if you want, what you want in your playground, they'll have a swing and a slide and a climbing frame, because a lot of people don't know anything different. I'm talking about adults as well. So what we try to do is phrase the questions on an emotional level. So I don't know, what's the nicest thing about sitting in the dark for you? Or what's your favorite things to do with your ears? And so ask those types of questions, and then build something around those answers, because they're really telling the way you get a response from those. Not that they're going to make much rational sense, but they do create a tone. that tone then can inform on the finished project, I guess. But that's kind of the thing. We try not to ask people like what you want in the playground, because it tends to you just have more swings. Swings are cool though. I love swings, but but anyway.
And you put your camera on. Did you want to ask a question?
Hi, Anne Colgan is my name, and I'm a local councillor from Dundrum in South Dublin. And Chair, hi, I have a group called Imagine Dundrum. One of my colleagues is here on the call. We have had indirect links with Aaron, and we're interested in regeneration of our village, but with a child-friendly focus. And we've just got our first hopscotch on the street, which is a very small start, but a very excellent one, thanks to our local architect. So my question is about whether you have done anything special around children and young people with disabilities?
Not specifically in relation to what you might see in a playground in terms of an inclusive playground, but the play streets and a lot of in particular are done in response to playgrounds and to provide an alternative play safe. When I say safe, I mean hazard free. I mean like literally remove the hazard that is a threat to children's lives, i.e. fast moving traffic, out of that equation for hours in their day. And as such, those implicit designs that you see in a playground, whether it's hopscotch, for example, there's only a few ways you can play with hopscotch. There's only a few ways you can play with a swing. There's only a few ways you can use a slide. And if you start breaking the rules, so to speak, that have been handed down from over and over in playgrounds, there's an awful lot going on that's unsaid in the playground in terms of what's expected of you. And the play street, however, is it's free, and it's also accessible, and it's also something that you can run for people, whether it's limited mobility or whether it's a child who finds it difficult to socialize because of a certain condition or whatever that is. I was just speaking to one of the people from Harris's group. I've gone now, but they work with children with autism. And I asked them that very question. I said, "Are you working on anything to do with playgrounds?" And he doesn't know. So I'm just gonna push him on that a little more. But just that idea of like, how does someone on the autistic spectrum play in a playground? And is that I don't know. It's yes, we take it into account, but not in terms of that design per se. But though that bench was also accessible, you could also eat at it at a wheelchair height. Was something else that we bore in mind, and the xylophone benches as well. Again, they're all to do with streets on the street. So if the street's accessible, which it often isn't, I'm afraid, but if it is accessible, then it is part of our design ethos. It's not a major front and center thing, though, but it's always a consideration. If that is just that.
Tilly, did you want to chip in with Tilly and Del? I'm assuming you're Tilly, actually.
Oh, that's Del.
Hey.
I can't see myself on the screen, so I don't know if you can see me or not. I really love all of this. I mean, for the start, it looks like you're inspired by me, actually, with a lot of your use of colors and shapes. So I do very much approve. I'm really glad that you just mentioned just now a little bit about disability and accessibility, and particularly autism, because my honor here, Tilly, is autistic herself. And I'm glad that you said, though, that it's not necessarily though your primary focus, that you're admitting that it's something that you consider. But this is why, this world needs so many different kinds of people in it, and so many different kinds of approaches, and different charities, organizations, if we all work together, we can come up with something that will work for everyone, you know, but not one individual or one charity can be trying to, you know, sing to everybody's hymn sheet, you know.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you.
What do you?
Sorry.
Sorry, Emma. Tilly, what would your response be to that in relation to playgrounds? As someone who has who's on who has autism, what would your what would your take be on that?
Well, on what you've shown, like for instance, the
When you go into a playground,
yes, when I go to
like your kind of generic
yes.
playground, or climbing frame, swings, slides, people running around. What was your experience? What is your experience? What's your sense of that?
Yes, I mean, I remember enjoying going to the playground to some extent, but I remember particularly when I got older, when I got towards being a teenager, it can be intimidating. I mean, I think it can be. I think in a way, unfortunately, that's why, you know, there's become a culture of ASBOs and things like that, because it, you know, unfortunately, the nature of things like that is that it can be intimidating at times for lots of different people for different reasons. I know myself, even when I was a young person, I found some of the other teenagers intimidating because I'm not someone that tends to, I've never been someone who's been in groups more, you know, sort of been in, like being in big crowds. You know, I tend to be someone who is often on my own or in a pair or in a smaller, quieter group. So I think in some ways it's about giving opportunities, because yet people like me, we do want to socialize, we do want to be part of things. It's not that we want to be alienated, but it's just that it can be overwhelming, it can be intimidating for us. So I think that's the main thing. I think it's not so much important to me. I mean, I love the swing and I love the slide, but it's not so much important to me what equipment is there so much. It's more the atmosphere and making it feel welcoming and as safe as possible, which I know is quite a different thing because of the nature of it, because it's predominantly outdoors, and you don't want it to have to be policed by people. You want it to be something that is open all the time and that anybody can come and go to. So I think that.
I
totally agree. My son is dyspraxic, and I think I've sort of, as a result, I've been learning more about neurodiversity, and I think I'm actually ADHD. So, you know, I think as you start to explore diversity, I realized with Playful Anywhere, pretty much without knowing what I was doing, because it's only recently that we've become more aware of it. I've always been looking at how do you create spaces for different moments, let's say, different. I want to be quiet now. I don't want to be in a group. I want to sort of whoosh around. I want to express myself bodily, you know, about, you know, so it's not one static thing, is it? You know, you can go from wanting to just be on your own reading a book, but no, there are other people around, through to kind of wanting to just run like the wind.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm not a playground designer, so I haven't had to sort of think about how the different worlds come together like that. But definitely when we're looking at play or play spaces on a sort of pop-up basis, it's always with that sort of sense of like, how do we create welcome? How do we invite people in? How do we kind of encourage those who want to just watch from the, you know, they don't want to dive right in, but they want to know that they're welcome and they can sort of observe. But then they know that they've been seen. So there's a kind of, that isn't a sort of static playground design. You're not there all the time. So that is a very sort of event-based way of doing it. But I think you're right. The more we absolutely encourage everybody's point of view and their preferred way of being and try to hold space for that, the better.
I think the other thing as well, just to mention, I don't know whether it's sort of inappropriate or irrelevant or whatever, but also it's the fact that you want places to be safe for children, and maybe not necessarily do you always want adults to constantly sort of be butting in to that, be interrupting and stopping children being free, because there's something about when children can create things with adults, but also when they can be left as much as possible just to create as children. But then there's also the thing, I'm 37. Sometimes I'd like to be able to go on a swing, but I worry about, I don't know whether I need to sort of allude to what I might be worried about, but obviously there is a culture of, is it appropriate? Is it appropriate if there's, a group of kids that seem to be mostly on their own together, and then all of a sudden a 37-year-old, with a patchwork pig the swing is free. Can I use it? Do you see what I mean? So it's also that, it's that dynamic that is very, very tricky, I think.
Yeah. And we hold ourselves back, don't we? And actually, maybe ideally there'll be swings everywhere for everybody, for all sizes and abilities, and it no longer feels abnormal. You don't just have them in a little parcelled playground. But this came up in a conversation with Tim Gill Monday. The idea that swings are quite a kind of good litmus test almost of how playful a place could be, whether they're rope swings that have been left there, or whether your town or city centre has a swing anywhere near it. So maybe it shouldn't be that we've only got like 3 swings per how many hundreds of thousands of people. We should have a revolution of more swings for everybody, and then none of us feel quite so awkward, perhaps.
We're really looking where we live, because of the lockdown, everybody's just started to throw up those rope swings onto the branches, onto the boughs of the trees. And there's I'd say there's about 15 of them in like a 5-minute walk away from me now. Like, we live right beside a place called St. Anne's Park. We're so lucky. Again, we live on like in a really place called Raheny, but it's, there's swings everywhere now. It's back to the way, and my son actually experienced that horrible feeling of one of those blue roped swings snapping mid-flight, mid-swing. And I'd forgotten how it felt. Like, I saw him, he kind of went like that. Just it felt like a sack of potatoes on it. But that feeling of just a rope swing snapping, it's so distant to me, but it's so vivid in my memory as to that feeling of the twang, the snap, and then the freedom of the fall, and then the thump at the landing, and then the checking yourself, and then the pain, obviously. But those little things,
then the embarrassment.
They're really, and the embarrassment, the humiliation. But yeah, they were quite formative for me, like falling out of trees and stuff like that as well. So it's,
and Carol's chipped in and said intergenerational is so important. A granny who likes a swing or a seesaw doesn't want to be a spectator at the playground. Exactly. I mean, I really think we should be designing for all ages, really. And I suppose the bit about the rope swing doesn't take a great deal of design. It just takes a little bit of self-permissioning, doesn't it? And hope it doesn't fray too much and people end up on there is a bit of what is the worst that can happen. So how can we permission ourselves, and this came up in the chat as well, to just do a little bit more without worrying too much, that we're not being well-behaved citizens. We should be able to judge the risk benefit of play a lot more. And I think that is actually one of the issues we've got in society, is that we've expected things to be given to us. We've lost the ability really to make those common sense, common practice judgments, I think. Now I'm
Yeah.
super conscious that it's now 2:20.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that this won't be the last time we convene together. I'm really hoping that some of the beautiful sort of strands and threads that emerge from this continue to be a live conversation. And we are on social medias. There's a Love to Play 2021 hashtag. If you want to get in contact and suggest events you want to run, there's a website you can add your own events and we'll start promoting them as well. So let's keep talking, I think. Let's learn from each other, keep playing.
Keep going until someone tells you to stop.
Perfect ending. Go and
Thanks
enjoy the
so
rest
much.
of your day.
And tell them who are they to tell you to stop. So that's that.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, guys. Bye. Thanks, Emma. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.